And we are live for week 4 of the Intentional Parenting Online Summit. We have with us again Tony and Nicole Davis for part 2. I also have my husband, Antonio McCoy, to join us today. We're really excited to kick this off. For those of you who have not already met our guest speakers for today, Tony and Nicole have been married for 29 years. They advocate for strong families. They've raised 2 sons who are fulfilling their purpose within their professions and gifts, running the Empower to Engage program, which is an organization designed to equip parents with resources to create stronger families. So, just to kickstart our conversation around leadership, I will have Tony and Nicole Davis tell you just a little bit more about who they are and why this conversation is so critical to families.
Yes, we are so glad to be with you and are so looking forward to talking to Antonio. We are Empowered to Engage, and Tony and I started this organization just a couple of years ago once we felt really comfortable with where our children were, because we wanted to be an example of the things that we were talking about. You know, it's easy to get information, but it's very hard to find examples who are truly living out the very things that we have learned from various experts and books and resources and all of those things. So once our children were in a decent place where we felt like, okay, they won't embarrass us, we started writing books. And we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute.
Hold on, but you're giving the wrong impression. But it wasn't about a decent place. Like,
what did you say?
You make it sound like they were in the gutters. We had to wait.
We had to make sure that they would not embarrass us.
That's no.
Okay, well, what would you say then?
Well, when it came to parenting, a lot of people were watching our children as they were growing up. They were saying things like, "You need to write books on it and talk about it." And then we would say, "No, hold on, wait a minute. We have to make sure that this thing works when they become the age of majority outside of our jurisdiction." Whereas I used to say
it. What would you say?
But Nicole didn't like it when I said it, but I guess you want me to say it now. I would say we have to make sure that they're not bums before we start telling people how to parent. So once they reach the age of majority, and then we found out that we discovered, and we were pleased to see that they were actually implementing what they were being taught.
And not bums.
Mm-hmm. Then we said, okay, now we're qualified to do what people have been asking us to do, because otherwise we would just be given information with no proof behind our methods working.
So you just mansplained me. You saw that?
No, I just cleared it up for the listener who may think that, oh yeah, whatever you just said, I would infer that maybe they were strung out or something, or they were in the gutter, had to be picked up, or
none of that.
One of them got out of prison and something along those lines.
None of that happened, thank God.
That's why you need mansplaining. But go ahead anyway.
So what we do is we have resources and tools that we offer, and we do that either through training and workshop programs, through mentoring and coaching. And we also do speaking engagements where we do just come out and share and answer questions. So we love working with parents. And as a part of that, when we're not able to do any of those things, we have written books. And Tony's going to take a few minutes to talk about them, but it's Parenting Done Right is Hard Work, but it's worth it. And the subtitle is a 31-day guide with practical and effective parenting tips to win the battle for your children. That's that one. And then Marriage Done Right is Hard Work, but it's worth it. And the tagline for this one is a 31-day guide to put the fun, fire, and focus back in your marriage. And then we have Leadership Done Right is Hard Work, but it's worth it. And this is 31 essential disciplines to becoming a leader of impact from the inside out. So all of these books are available on Amazon or on our website that can help parents, marriages, and individuals. The way it's set up, they're devotional. So there's a part in there where you can write in there. There are questions in there, especially for marriages. And the leadership guide really provokes you to think about how you are character-wise and how it is that you interact with individuals. So we've gotten great feedback on them. And that's how we also help when we're not able to be in the room.
Yeah, and as you say, we wrote them devotional style for the sole purpose of making them easy to read and easy to go through. But the reality is, we said it's hard work. So when you start reading what's in them, there's nothing easy about it. We ask a lot of thought-provoking questions, and then if you're married, just to be quite honest with you, it may cause some arguments, right? But our perspective is it's better for you to argue about it for 2 or 3 days and then come to a resolution than to have years of unresolved anger and bitterness. And then that sets the foundation for an unfulfilled or unfruitful marriage. And then even with the children, I mean, there are a lot of things. We talked about a lot of tough topics, but we want you to know that, as we said, it's a battle for your children. I think most of us know that's a battle for our children. But what we usually do, especially, we've been trained to just say, we give up. Hey, I can't do anything with them. The way the world is, oh my goodness, I can't do anything with my children. And I just lost them to the streets, or I just lost them to society, or I lost them to culture. And then the children feel the same way. They don't like you. Then they just want to leave the house at 18 years old, as we just touched on a little bit last week. And it doesn't lead to having a unified family that grows stronger as the generations go forth. So we address the issues to help you really make unity a focus so that you can have a family that's together and that you can guys really like each other and want to be around each other. And even more importantly, want to support each other and all of your individual and collective endeavors.
Awesome. You all are just a great example, and the success in raising your son speaks to itself. What I am very excited about, whenever I posted that the topic would be on leadership, we had immediate responses from men in our group, which was really excellent to see men step up to the plate. And I want to encourage our listeners, first of all, you don't have to be a perfect parent. Second of all, this talk is for married and single families, for male and female. So that's why I did bring Antonio along for this conversation, so we can hear from the male perspective and the female perspective around leading the family unit. So with that being said, let's sort of talk a little bit around what you think you can bring to the table as mom and dad.
Well, I know one of the things, Precious, when you initially asked us to be a part of this segment, you talked about the vision, right? The vision for your family. And then we talk about what we bring to the table as mom and dad. And you're looking at, well, how do we make all this stuff work, right? So let's look at where we are. So let's look at the reality. And I'm glad you said that with this topic has drawn the interest of men, because men, we have a certain mindset for the most part. Now, I'm going to generalize here. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, here's the mindset of a man, especially when it comes to vision. And I'm going to speak about the American man, and probably even more specifically, the African American man. But in general, when men think of vision and they think about what does it mean to be a mom and dad, or even a husband, the scope is really limited. I would say but we usually prioritize two things. One, how do I keep a roof over the family's head? And two, how do I keep food on the table? And if I can check both of those boxes, then I'm doing my job as a man. But when we think about that, we don't really get into other things like character and supporting our spouses and supporting our children and growing up. As a matter of fact, I remember, I can just even go back to how important money is to men. I remember one time, and I don't think I'm disclosing any confidentiality here, because you'll have no idea where I was and who I was talking to when I said this, but I was in a church setting and I was talking to a bunch of men, and I said, okay, men, let's just be honest about it. I said, let me ask you a question. Why are you guys here? And they looked at me and I said, and I got a little more specific, and I said, well, let me ask you this question. I said, and I purposely chose this number that I'm going to give in a second. I said, if you were making $250,000 individually, would you be in a church environment like this trying to figure out how to live a life as a man of God? And the reason I chose that figure, because I knew that some of the men in that environment were probably either very close to that or semi-close to that. Some of them with their spouses probably were at that number or even exceeding it. So I gave them something that was really attainable. But I can tell you, when I threw that out there, I said, no, I want you to really imagine that. And would you be here? And we had an environment of honesty, and they were like, nah, man, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing any of this. They like, shoot, if I was making $250,000 individually, I'm not so sure I would be doing any of this, right? Because they would feel like, hey, life is good. And why would life be good for them? Because I can keep a roof over their head and I can keep a food on the table. But then when you talk about from the perspective of a mom and dad, here's what happens when we start bringing children into the picture, into the scenario. What happens a lot of times with the women is the women tend to focus on that nurturing aspect of the woman comes out, whether she's always been that way or if the childbirth may even bring it out in her. They focus on the children. And because of the man being such a provider and wanting to be the protector of the home, they focus on their careers. But here's what actually happens when those children come into this scenario. Now, women are focusing on the children, men are focusing on the career or making sure that things are taken care of financially. And that's even if the spouse works, a woman's spouse works. The result is now what happens is a lot of times the spousal relationship will suffer because the focus is no longer on your spouse or helping to build things with your spouse. And then what'll happen also is with the kids, a lot of times a dad may not even get that bond or have that that unity with the kids because that's a responsibility that usually gets just delegated to the mom. It's like, hey, if there's anything that's happening with the kids, she's going to take care of it. It's on her plate. As long as there's a roof over the head and there's food on the table, we are good. But then what happens was now you'll grow up, and we see it happen all the time. We talk about winning the battle for your kid. There's no relationship, and by the time we try to start getting meaningful relationships with the children are at an age where they probably have formed their own opinions about us. They no longer want to deal with us. They got it in their mind, when I turn 18, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to do my own thing. And depending on how many children you have, it can take a long time before the husband and wife to get back together again as just a couple. But then by the time they do that, sometimes the relationship can be strained, or if you're trying to rekindle that fire, sometimes it's really tough to get it back because you spend so much time apart. And even if it's good, it's a lot of, I guess, statistics really show that a lot of times it's never as good as it was the first time. And then you have your children leaving the house, and then they really go back out and repeat what you've done, what they've seen from you. And then it's like, well, why are our families this way? So I know what I've really done is, your question was, what can we do as mom and dad? I just really articulated the problem. But I think a lot of things that we can do is what we talked about last week about being intentional, building that relationship with our children, but also with our spouses. And I know I've been talking a long time, so I'm going to go ahead and let you say something.
I just want to add a couple things because that's absolutely right. I think, once you know you're going to have a child, and even as you're thinking about being a parent in some distant future, even if you don't have kids yet, you're always saying, I want to create a future or a living or a lifestyle for my children that's better than the one that I had. I mean, that's almost, no matter where you're from,
regardless of culture,
it doesn't matter. That's probably what a lot of us are saying. And I know for us, I would personally think, what can I do? And I would tell the kids, this is how we think about you. What can we do to make your lives better? What can we do? And so that would be instant by instant. It wasn't something big down the road, like give you more of this or greater of that. It was, how in this moment can you feel valued? Can you feel appreciated? Can you feel respected? Can you feel heard? Like, those were things that we were thinking of day by day, because we know each instance, each choice, each situation is building our children, either for the good or for the bad. And we're also, as parents, putting a lot of emphasis on what kind of choices are you making? And we're exemplifying that by the kind of choices that they see us make. So as parents, we have a very critical role, one of teacher and one of example. And I was thinking maybe mentor or guide. But it is how we're living that is just as important. It is just as important as what we are saying.
And I would even say it's even more important.
Okay, go ahead.
It's even more important than what we're saying, because people they're going to follow your example, and what they're going to look at, they're going to see, look, if your example doesn't match your words, what they're going to say is, look, my mom is phony, my dad is phony, and big old hypocrite with a big old capital H, right? I don't want to do anything like they've done it, and that's really tough, especially for those of us. And I know everybody in your audience may not necessarily be Christians or part of a faith group, but nevertheless, for those of us who express some kind of faith, it's even worse when your child thinks that you're a hypocrite, right? Because you've given them a totally different one message in public or even in private, but they see that your actions and your decisions, your attitudes don't match that, and we don't understand the damage that we can be doing to our children. I'm gonna tell you, when you were going down that list of some of the things that's really important, I can tell you just, and I attribute Nicole's social work education with this. It was really important to you that our kids, our children felt heard, that their voices mattered even at the youngest ages. Even though it was age appropriate, they were never treated as, oh, he's only 6, he's only 7, he's only 5, and that his opinion doesn't matter, because in his world, that was his reality. That was really true. And now I'm going to make you feel like what you say has value, and we're going to see how we're going to accommodate that. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, you're so young, just get over it. It's like, no, your voice actually carried a lot of weight. I mean, it was like dropping a 50-pound weight on the scale. It's like when you said something, those scales tilted, boom, because your words had that much weight. And it was even at the youngest ages. Yeah. That was very important.
I think you have brought up some very important points and covered a lot of ground with that first question that I posed. And one of the reasons why I have invited you on is because, as I said in the first session that we had together last week, what's really nice is that you are a very mature family. You've raised your sons, and you've talked about it. Although you have raised your sons well, you've never raised a 22-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old. And I just love that you have talked about that. And Antonio, as soon as I got home after that session last week, he went immediately into action with some things that we could incorporate into our family. But I want to open it up for Antonio to talk a little bit. We talked about mom and dad, but for us to talk about some of the shared responsibilities that we do have, especially under the pandemic and the hustle and bustle of life as we know it, whenever we have to be constantly on with our children, we're their teacher, we're their cook, we're their housemaid, and all of those things. So I'd like for us to sort of share the dynamic, which is ever changing at this time for us as parents.
Yeah. So first and foremost, just hello everyone, and good afternoon to Tony and Nicole. Just wanted to say, after listening last week, I was just like Precious said, I was really, like, as you all were talking, I was writing notes, and we literally have been speaking on some of the things that you all talked about last week in terms of relationship building and the intentionality when we talk about the type of relationship we want with our children. And it doesn't happen by happenstance, but we have to really be thoughtful about it. And even with this particular question Precious is raising now in terms of the shared responsibilities, I think that's another one of those areas where you have to be intentional about what that looks like. I was in marching band. Anyone who saw the movie Drumline, they talked about one band, one sound. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I, even in my career, working with youth in the community, and then just in another facets, I would talk about, as an organization, we need to be one band, one sound. But then I would find myself coming home at times and, well, I'm going to do it this way. Well, mama said that. And then what happens is the kids pick up on that because there's not intentionality in terms of our coordination as a pair, in terms of leading our family. And then that gets into, when you start thinking about the vision and the purpose of your family and all of that. So for me, I think it's key, that coordination in terms of shared responsibility, so that we are speaking the same language, the kids are hearing the same message, and they see that it's not, well, this is what mama does and this is what daddy does, but this is what our family does. Right. This is how we coordinate. This is how we operate as a unit. It's so key and it's so vital because just the realities being what they are for a lot of our children, that they aren't seeing that on a regular basis. And I can't be dependent that when my son and my daughter walk out my door, that if I don't put that message in them in terms of what coordination looks like at home, I can't expect them to do it anywhere else. So for us, in terms of thinking about the vision, one of the things I really like about even just this intentional parenting online summit is that it's really kind of forced us as a young parent, as young parents, I'll say, to really revisit those visions and those things that we talked about when before we even got married. And we had this whole journal that we wrote out in terms of what we wanted our family to be and what that looked like. And in that, in that moment, you're young and you don't have kids, you're not burdened by the mortgage and all of that stuff. So you have these grand visions. And then once child number one comes, we're so enamored with it's happening. But for me, I remember that moment, and this is one of the things I tell friends now who are starting to have kids. I remember holding my son in the hospital, and I was thinking, like, to me, it was like a switch flipped, and all of the immature. I'm not gonna say it all washed away, but just the changing of mind began to take place. And Precious will tell you, it's probably been an arduous journey for us and for me in terms of getting to that place of coordination and getting to that place of what does shared responsibility look like. And I know that was the initial question, and please, Precious will pull my coattail, because I'll get to talking and I'll run 5 different conversations at once. But in terms of that shared responsibility piece, it started then at that moment for me that I need to figure out what this needs to look like if we're going to raise the children that we want, but also that God wants us to raise too. And I think that's the vital point, the vital key for us. So it did come to us having to have conversations to coordinate. She brings up the pandemic. And the start of all this, because and at the initial of this, I always work from home. She started working from home. The kids started working from home, and everybody was driving everybody crazy because we were all used to operating during those hours of the day the way that we operate. I'm used to having the house to myself because those are my work hours. I'm used to her being out. She's used to being in the office. They're used to being in school. And it really took, we have to figure out what this needs to look like in order for us to coordinate the way that we need to. So we intentionally sat down. What's your schedule? What do you have going on today? When do you have meetings? Who can get up and fix breakfast? Who can, and it was that intentionality about setting the schedule. And one of the things that it brought back to mind in my career that makes total sense. There are very few things I do on the job right now where I don't plan it out. I don't come up with a work plan. I don't figure out when is this due, who's going to do what, and who's on first, second, and third, so that we can bring this thing home. And so, like, bring it almost when she started having that conversation, and we started having that conversation, it brought that home and said, you know what? We need to do some of those similar things here. But it's that communication piece. I think a lot of times we get into the habit of just assuming that, oh, well, we're on the same page because we live in the same house together, and it doesn't work that way. You have to be coordinated. You have to communicate. And then that has to trickle down to your children. I think, it does us no good to talk about the vision. It does us no good to talk about it amongst ourselves if we don't then communicate that to our son and our daughter in a way to where it's digestible for them, but in a way to where they can also buy into it as well and even gain and grab onto their piece of it, which gets back to what you all talked about last week in terms of that relationship. It doesn't start. I can't think that I'm going to start building the relationship I want with them on their way out the door.
Right.
It has to start today. And all of that coordination and all that plays into it.
So I let Tony know that Tonys like to talk a lot before I invited my husband here for this talk, but definitely very welcome thoughts that you're sharing. We adjusted and we readjusted, but the point being that we do each have our part to play in the success of the family unit. And I love that we have sort of gotten into more of a discussion around sharing with other families the reality of this thing. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort goes into it. It doesn't happen overnight. So this leads me to, I'm not afraid to talk from a spiritual point of view. I'm a preacher's child, so that's what you'll get from me. My favorite verse is Habakkuk 2 that tells us to write the vision and make it plain. And as my husband shared a moment ago, when we first got married, we had a sheet of paper and we literally wrote down every detail of what we wanted out of our marriage. How many bedrooms in the household, how many children. We're a little off today, but hey, we wrote it down, and it allowed us to have this goal in mind. So with sharing that, I'd like to know a little bit more from you, Tony and Nicole, about your vision for your family, or what you may have initially had in mind, how you sought out to obtain those things that you had in mind, and just some of the things that God blessed you with in spite of everything that you could conceive at the moment.
I'm gonna let you do the second part with the vision, but I just want to talk about first this about.
Okay. So yeah, you want to give some stats on that?
Yes.
Okay, but before you do that, can I just hit on some things that Antonio said first?
Oh,
okay, she deferred to me. She's playing center field, and she said I got it, but I called her off as a left fielder. You know, the center fielder's supposed to take it, but I'm going to call off as a left fielder because I'm a Gold Glover, right? That's for my baseball fans. But anyway, you want to talk about some stats, and I know you want to do that because it's very important, and that's really the foundation of why we do a lot of what we do. But I can tell you this: I want to touch on a couple of things that Antonio brought up, just real fast, because I don't want to miss this point. So one of the things he mentioned is that it's not about what mama does or about what daddy does, but it's about what the family does. And that's good. That's good. I would just want to tell people that even when you're having those discussions about what the family does, a key thing to do there is explain why the family does what the family does. What's the outcome that we expect by doing it this way? And that's part of the conversation that we need to have. Journal. I scribbled that down so bad I can't even read my own handwriting. It looks like a prescription, so I'll skip that point. But the other one, you talked about the pandemic and how schedules change. And what I would a nugget I want to give families, especially for those of you who have small children who are going through the pandemic, and yeah, there's an adjustment in schedules, and we all have to work around that. But I'm going to tell you one of the things that we want to have conversations about too is acknowledge the obstacles that are now present because of this. But especially if you have young children, let them express what they are really going through and be an empathetic ear to help them overcome that. But in addition to that, don't necessarily say, "Oh, woe is us" because of this world pandemic. Talk about the benefits that can be extracted from being together during this season, because it hasn't always been this way and it won't always be this way. But now that we are together and we're here, let's talk about how we can maximize this time together. So those are just some of the things I want to bring up based on the points that he brought up. I know.
You sure you want to try to figure journal to be?
No, okay.
All right. So one of the other things I just wanted to bring up really quickly.
I don't understand hearing the weight problem.
Okay. Is as we're talking about what's going on and the vision that we have for our children, Tony and I wrote in this book called Speak to the Mountains. It's an anthology. And we were able to write a chapter on parenting. And the title of the chapter is Cultivating Identity and Purpose in Our Children. Because a lot of times when we are giving, when we're thinking about our vision and we're thinking about what it is that we want to accomplish, something that we talked about last week is at what cost. And so that always has to be that caveat or in parentheses at whatever it is that you have written down, at what cost, because a lot of times we get lost in the goals and we don't assess the impact of going after those things on those who are supposed to make the goals happen. So here's some statistics to consider.
And as a matter of fact, she's quoting directly from what
this is what we wrote in the book.
This is part of what we wrote in the book.
Okay, it says, September 2017, a Real Clear Politics poll revealed that only 32% of Americans believe the country is going in the right direction, and that was in 2017. A Gallup poll from May 2017 rating moral values in the United States shows that 45% of Americans believe that our values are poor, and 77% believe our values are getting worse. In that same study, when Americans were asked what has caused the moral decline,
get this,
Poor parenting was rated among the top 3 reasons. Another study conducted by Faithit shows 59% of millennials who were raised in church are choosing to stop attending church after age 18. And a Barna research study indicates that most young people admit that they do not receive sufficient attention from their parents. They do not have enough good friends whom they can count on, are unsettled about their own future, have personal spiritual perspectives but not much of a sense of a spiritual community, lack role models, do not feel that they have intrinsic value. And so what we were stating that although these are the statistics, there's still hope. Because what we first believe needs to happen is what it is that we're focusing on or what we believe to be most important in the lives of our family or in us individually and collectively. It starts with how we feel as a human being. And without that being intact, no matter about the goals for financial prosperity, homes, cars, where you live, job, whether your children go to college, start a business, all of those things are secondary to how they feel as a person and how you, as the mother and as the father, feel as a person. So all of our efforts, in the beginning, I would say that what was our primary focus? Because Precious asked us, what were we thinking about? I don't think it was ever about material things, because my fight has always been against dysfunction. And dysfunction is a huge problem in families, specifically in Black families, because I'm a product of a Black family, fully Black. So the dysfunction.
Why do you say fully Black and look over here?
Because I just always hear you. I always hear things that you're saying. But because of that, knowing that dysfunction will deteriorate any vision, any goal, any plan, any aspiration, we must first attack that we put our children and our family in a better place than where we came from as it relates to how we interact with one another, what we think about each other, what we think about family, what we think about hard work, what we think about being respectful, what we think about being helpful, just characteristics that make you a decent and good person. If you don't have those things in place, you don't have to worry about ever being married. You don't ever have to worry about doing well on a job because no one's going to deal with you. And so while we can think big term, long-term, big plans, the real work is in preparing people to be productive members of society. And so that starts with the very basic work of dealing with the statistical truths or facts that are out there about how people feel about who they are. And so we have spent more of our time, although we're both educated, and we're educated because we just wanted, it's not that we were telling our children, you have to go to college. We just wanted them to see what's possible beyond what we said. So Tony has a JD, he has an MBA. I have a doctorate degree. Our older son has an MBA, or maybe a master's degree. He said no, he's done. Right. I'm talking about Jay. He has a master's degree. And then our younger son is pursuing his law degree right now. Now, we never told them that they had to go to college. We never.
No, for us, when it came to their purpose and future, it was all about what were they interested in.
What do you want?
Let's expose them, and then we'll go from there. But being a preacher's kid, I'll address Habakkuk chapter 2. That's a famous one. And I'm gonna tell you, Precious, you may find this interesting, but we talk about that particular scripture all the time. Write the vision, make it plain, and you can run with it, and all that kind of good stuff. And we've talked about it, but I can tell you that Nicole and I, we've always approached that from a perspective that was a little different than what we've traditionally heard in church. And now, granted, we've talked about it, like the purpose of writing it down and all that stuff, and running with it from the perspective of having energy. But we've never been dogmatic about it from just writing it down. Because I can tell you, even talking to men, especially in the church environment, you bring up that scripture. And as I said, most men are like, hey, food on the table, roof over the head. That's my vision. And stretching me beyond that is really tough. So now when you're telling them to get a vision for the family and write it down, it's like, what are you talking about, man? I'm doing what I'm supposed to. I'm handling my business. Isn't that enough? Like, no, you got to do more than that. So now they struggle. Really, men will just struggle, and then the vision almost becomes artificial because they felt like they were pressured into coming up with something beyond their normal scope of what they thought their responsibilities were. For us, it's never been anything material about what we're going to do with our family, like the type of house. And granted, we've had discussions about houses and bigger houses and living in certain cities and things of that nature, but that's never, ever for us. It's never been a goal.
It's been a quality conversation.
It's been a quality of life conversation. And we talked about like living in certain neighborhoods because of the schools, but then that didn't even really matter because we ended up sending our kids to private school because we thought we moved into a brand new, great building community. And then the public school was terrible, right? Once the students started showing up. But nevertheless, we never talked about it from that perspective because we understood that things could change. We only talked about having a strong foundation for our family and how do we get there. And what is God saying to us individually, and how do we support each other? And I think this is one of the things that really helped us with that. We understood that our lives would have different seasons. I remember, like even when I was in law school, and one of the things that my law school did is they brought the people in who were close to you to say, okay, your spouse or brother or whoever's going to be going through law school, especially for those of us who are in the evening program, here's what they're going to be going through, and here's how you can support them as they're going through that endeavor. So in my case, we knew that was a 4-year sacrifice, and we had to do things a little differently. And after those 4 years, we can shift it and go to do something else. But we knew that life had ebbs and flows and seasons. So we understood that, and we just talked about what are we doing to make sure that we're supporting each other. And I'm gonna tell you I know I'm being redundant there, but that was the key. What is on your heart? What's on my heart? And now that we have the kids, and how do we make sure that they have everything that they want? And then we will see how it goes. From a monetary perspective, like I said, materialistically, we've never. And people will look at us and say, "Well, you drive really nice cars, and you can't tell me that you're not materialistic." We'll say, "Well, actually, I have this particular vehicle because when the vehicle that I used to have, it was a truck. It was a Mitsubishi Montero, as a matter of fact. I'll tell you what it was. The engine blew up, and I wanted to keep that thing, but because I was transporting my children back and forth with sports, I needed a vehicle that had a large trunk space." So
what that has taught them is to appreciate quality. They've never gone after name brands, and it's not even that we've had to really tell them they didn't want it. It's not like they wanted it and we were saying, no, you can't have that. But we have really taught them how to determine what's valuable. Like when you make your money, because they would earn money, whether it was through their report cards or chores or special projects.
When they didn't do their chores, we would deduct the money.
Or look, we would borrow their money so we could teach them the interest, so they knew if they.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So one time we'd be like, okay, we're going to the barbershop. Oh, I don't have any cash.
They would run.
It's like, okay, I need to borrow some money so I can pay the barber, because they knew that when we borrowed money from them, granted, I could just went to the ATM machine and got the money, but it's like if we borrow money from you, we always pay them back with interest. So what we were teaching them is how to be the lender instead of the borrower.
And they knew that they had to pay for the things that they wanted, and we would pay for the things that they needed. So they then had to determine, is this worth my money? Because if you want those shoes, you're going to pay for those shoes.
Because those aren't a need.
That's not a need.
You have the shoes you need now. If you want something different,
shoes, right,
that's up to you now. And you have to make sure that you do your work to earn the money to get it. But it was really difficult in my house to earn that money because my kids weren't allowed to get jobs other than inside the home. Their job was to go to school and get good grades. That was their job. Mm-hmm. So any money that they had to earn, they had these taskmasters right here who were very tough. I mean, you're talking about military disciplinarians who wouldn't cut you any slack. And it's like, oh my goodness, and I have to earn money with your approval. That was tough, but now it makes it easier for them now that they're age of majority.
Or at the end of the year, however much you've saved, we'll double that. So we taught them values like that, as opposed to it always being you can't do this, you can't have that, or trying to give them everything that they ask for. We're trying to teach them how to live a quality life.
Yes.
And that's been our vision.
So, and our vision was, like I said, to lead a life by being a good example. Now, even from a marriage perspective, even now, and we didn't do it this year, and I guess we can call it because of the pandemic, but we didn't do it. But nevertheless, we still have the conversations. We have a yearly marriage vision retreat where we sit down and we reassess exactly where we are. What does God put on your heart? What does God put on my heart? How do we help you with your individual goals? What are the collective goals? The who, what, where, whens, whys, and hows. We discuss it all. And I just gonna be telling you guys, when you bring up these things and look, what do I like about you? What do I not like about you? What do I want you to do better? What do I want you to be better at? What do I want you to be better at for me? And I can tell you, and it's not always as lovey. Oh, you're just so wonderful. No. It's like, here's how we need to get better. Remember, we are hard charging disciplinarians, military grade, and we deal with each other like that because we want some results, right? So we have those, and that's our vision. That's our vision retreat. Here's what we said last year. Here's where we missed it. Why did we miss it? Here's what we did well. Here's what we can get better at. We have, and we go away for several days and have these conversations.
And parents can do that with their children. It doesn't have to be a husband and wife. You just have to show that everybody is working together for a collective end. And how are we going to do that?
And I can tell you, and just from a standard perspective, we have these standards. We know that, I mean, we've really taken that thing called, a lot of people, they have this like a nice little plaque. I even have it on my desk downstairs, the Serenity Prayer, right? We understand that there are some things that we can't control. And we look at the words of the Serenity Prayer, and we really have learned to embrace of, hey, I can't control that, so I'm not going to get all bent out of shape about that. I can tell you that there are some scriptures that we've come to embrace. I know mine is, and from the New Living, from the Living Translate, the Living Bible, not even the New Living, but it says, since the Lord is directing your steps, why do you need to understand everything that happens along the way? And that's Proverbs 20:24. And that was one of the things that became really key for me because I'm an analytical guy. I have to figure out everything. And if I can't figure out everything, then hold on, wait a minute, something's wrong here. But it's like, is the Lord directing your steps? And if the Lord's directing your steps, you don't have to understand. You just need to go. And I can tell you, and that's a faith thing, right? But for me, I mean, I can sit here and act like, oh yeah, hallelujah, I'm so spirit. No. Sometimes I need to figure this thing out because I can get in my own head, right? And Nicole's one is many are the plans of a man's heart, but the purpose of the Lord will prevail. And I know that's Proverbs 19:21 and 22. And it's like, but okay, now that we can quote these scriptures, how do we embrace them and incorporate them into our lives? Because what it really does, Precious and Antonio, is it helps us understand that even as we have this vision for our family and what we're doing, knowing it gives us permission to be flexible. Because a lot of times what will happen is we'll start going to Habakkuk chapter 2, we'll start writing it down, and then as opposed to, like I said, for a lot of men, that's an arduous exercise, but then we let it handcuff us. Because I wrote it down, now I have to do everything that's right there. And then there's no freedom. And look, being a preacher's child, right? We look at one of our favorite prophets, Isaiah. See, now you got me preaching. I don't even want to preach on this thing. But you look at one of our favorite prophets, Isaiah. So what does he do? When there's going to be a famine in the land, right? It's like the Lord was going to take care of our favorite prophet. What did he tell him in 1 Kings 17? He said, go down to Cherith. There's a brook there. You're going to drink from the brook, and I commanded the ravens to feed you. Now, how crazy is that, right? Got these birds feeding you. These birds should be eating the food themselves, but yet they're going to feed you. So did he hear from the Lord? Absolutely. He heard from the Lord. But then what happens? He got there, and then the brook dried up. Hold up, Lord, you told me to come here. Why is this brook drying up? Okay, now what do? He says, now I want you to go to Zarephath. You go to Zarephath. I have commanded a widow woman to feed you. Now, granted, a widow woman, she should be someone who needs help, but yet I've commanded her to feed you. What would Tony do in that situation? Tony would probably say, oh, no, I ain't going no Zarephath. I heard the Lord say Cherith. But no, sometimes you have to remain flexible and take that next step. Don't let one word handcuff you and keep you stagnant. And that's what will happen when we start writing things down. It can bless us, but it can also handcuff us.
That's good. Right. That's real good.
Okay, I'm preaching. Go ahead.
Oh, no. We're going to get right back to what you were sharing. But remember that my line of questions, I ended with, and what is it that the Lord blessed you with that you could not conceive at that very moment? So I love the direction that you have gone. I'm hearing growth mindset. I'm hearing financial literacy.
Yes,
I'm hearing
absolutely.
revision,
Right.
right? Because there's a vision and then the revision. You have to
Absolutely.
revisit to revision. I'm hearing teamwork and faith with works, right? Because
And
faith
and,
without
I,
works
And
is dead.
flexibility.
So
and flexibility, and I think that's one of the things we have to be flexible, because even when we get these grandiose visions for our children, and here's another thing, we talk about like the family dynamics, right? Well, these see, in your kids' mind, it's hard for them to fathom that you and Antonio had to meet, right? From our kids' perspective, Nicole and I have always been together. I didn't grow up in the Baltimore, and she grew up in Akron, Ohio. It's like, and we had to meet somewhere all across the world. It's like, in their mind, we've always been together, right? So here's where I'm going with this. Because we talk about this family dynamic and this legacies and all this kind of stuff that we want to create for our children. Well, guess what's going to happen to them? They're going to go meet somebody else too. And we have no idea who this person is. We have no idea what their mindset is. We hope it's similar to ours, but sometimes you're blessed in that way, and sometimes you're not, right? But yet now you got these family units that have to come together. It's like, and how do we establish a legacy knowing that in your case, you have two, we have two. So we know that there are two more that's going to come in that's going to alter those dynamics some kind of way. We're hoping that they can be an asset, but they just may not be. So we can say, well, this is the vision I have for my family, and we're going to go and, man, I'm going to look. Here's another one. I'm going to leave an inheritance to my children's children. Well, yeah, you may have taught your children, but now the one that they're going to marry is going to blow it, and your children don't have nothing, right? We don't know. So
it's too many variables.
It's too many variables, so that's why we can't get stuck. It's too many. We can't get stuck.
I really appreciate that, because sometimes from a spiritual perspective, we believe that people are preaching perfection on us, and you are allowing us room to grow. It's
Yes.
really important for those who are listening in, and you see all this wonderful display of how parenting can work, for you to understand that a lot of work and effort has gone into making it possible. And it takes work and growth and all of that. And I'll allow if Antonio wants to chime in here and share anything.
Yeah, no, there was a lot. I wasn't as good as writing my notes down, so I may be giving you a call after this. But no, I'll be honest with you. I really love that part about the revisit, like not allowing that initial vision, because in our case, that initial vision, we were what, 22, 23, 24, with limited experiences.
Right.
One of the things that I tell people all the time is that you have to be willing to be flexible. You have to be willing. See, that initial plan, what it does is that lays the foundation. You want to make sure that it's firm. You want to make sure that it's sound. But then you have to build on it. And sometimes, one of the programs that I ran here in our local area, it was teaching kids how to do construction. And the way we taught construction is that we started off not doing new builds. We started off rehabbing. And so when you rehab, you go into that initial project with one vision in mind. This is what we're going to do. Well, you get into some of those older houses, you start tearing stuff away. You realize we got to figure something out here, because we're seeing issues that we didn't know were there before. Right. And that's the thing that we Precious and I, we were actually having this conversation this morning. We dated for 7 years before we got married. But what we realized is that despite dating for those 7 years, once we got married, I realized that, this is a different person.
I don't
really know the person that I had envisioned in my mind. And so the thing is, we had to, take a moment. There was that moment where we had to sit back and revisit and say, all right, now what does this rehab project look like? We started out thinking we were building something that was fresh and we all were on the same accord. But you know what? We're actually in the process now of having to relearn, what it's like to actually live with Precious, and Precious to live with Antonio. And then what does that mean once we start inviting, our children into this mix?
Right.
It's that constant willingness. Because a lot of times I think, one of the things I really appreciate that you said, Tony, was that, from the male perspective, a lot of times we think about, hey, I'm providing. And our role and in terms of what we contribute, our vision stops at that point.
That's it.
You ain't got to worry about where you're sleeping. You ain't got to worry about what you're eating, the lights on. You got everything you want. And the
I'm a man.
yeah, and I've provided. That's that provider instinct, right? But the reality is, when we talk about building families, it's more than just providing that physical or that financial, safety or comfort, but it really has to be, that emotional, that spiritual, that development, that just being that. I love that conversation even about the example. And you talk about, hey, we're going to school. Our kids are seeing us go to school, and so they know what's possible. So there was a lot that you all talked about. I'm probably all over the place, but one of the things that the biggest nugget that I would put out there for people, you have to be willing to revisit. You have to be willing to reflect and determine kind of what the next step needs to be. That's why GPS is reroute. They don't just say, hey, you missed your turn, go figure it out so that you can get back to that turn. They will reroute you so that you still get to your intended destination. It might just take you a few extra minutes or a few extra turns than it was originally there, but nevertheless, you still get there. And for our families, we have an expected destination. When we talk about building and growing and seeing our children, turn into those productive citizens and those productive members of society, and the fact that it starts in our family, there may be bumps, there may be bruises, there may be, reroutes and all kind of turnarounds. But staying the course, being willing to kind of take those reroutes when necessary, allows us to get to that appointed or that expected destination.
And I'm gonna tell you, Antonio, and with that being said, you talked about rehabbing. I would say use the best quality materials that you can afford as well. Don't be cheap.
Right.
Don't be cheap. And so if you're looking at how do I rehab my family, it's going to take some investment.
Yep.
And don't take the easy, cheap way out. It may look pretty, but it won't last.
You're right on it. I was reading an article earlier this week. They talked about that. What's that show? Extreme Makeover. And they talked about, people who were complaining years down the road because it looks pretty whenever they pull the van back or the bus back and you see this wonderful house. But then they said once you get in and 2 days in, you see they taped up when they should have nailed or screwed something in. Right. They putty when they should have did something else. And so it's going to show. It's going to go forward. And so, no, I appreciate that point as well, because you're talking to somebody who's going to cheap out if they can with my project around here. And I got a project in the backyard right now that's suffering because I tried to cheat my way out of it. So it's worth it.
What goes with that?
What goes more about it. So the thing is,
Nicole's gonna make a point about what goes with that.
Oh, I will. Example though, and this is real life. We were not in agreement with this project, and one of the first things I cautioned him was make sure before they dig up in our backyard that you are certain that this is the best contractor to go with, that they have quality work, right? Because we're talking about quality right now. But I'll let you talk, Nicole. I just want to share a real life story while we have a minute there.
What everybody has said makes the point that I'm going to make, because when you said foundation, I'm not sure that we're even ready to put the word foundation with vision yet. I would say framework. For the very fact of what you just said, because we have to do a reality test and check to see if even what we're saying is where we want to go. Is that realistic for who we are and what we need? Can we really accomplish that in the time period that we've set? And the only way you're going to know that is to break it down, look at all of your materials, look at your workers, and to see who's really invested in this right now. How much attention can we really give it before you can determine this is going to stay? Now, for us, we're Christians, so Christ is our foundation. From there, we build all this other stuff. But the vision is simply a framework written in pencil, because all those things will change, have to change based on life, based on personalities, based on our interests and values and needs, all that changing based on learning. All of that will subject us to have to revisit the framework, but we don't even have a framework. That's the problem. We're not talking, and we need to start there.
Right. Well, no, I appreciate that. I'm going to borrow that and moving forward. No, because it's so true though, and I think that's the thank you for that, because I think that is the part. It is that framework. It is that we have to write it in pencil. If we were that original plan for us, we'd have 4 kids right now. and the reality is the 2 is definitely enough.
Right.
So.
Yes.
Definitely.
We're done. He said we're done.
Yeah. Well, see, the other part of our vision was I only wanted one girl. And so she came number 2, and that was our key. That
was a sign from the heavens.
Thank you. We receive it.
Right. That was the answer I needed. But I really appreciate this dialogue. When we talk about intentional parenting and building the family, it really does start with that. Like everything we talked about. What you all talked about last week, and then carrying over to this week. When we think about really what is that vision is so key. And I actually work in grants management from my career standpoint. So I have a ton of different, grants all over the place. And one of the things I tell every new program director, first conversation we have whenever they first get their award and they're excited because I got $1 million or whatever it is. And I say, you need to have a vision for what this organization and what this program is going to be, because you as the leader, if you don't have the vision that drives this, then it's going to go all over the place. And I know I speak that from experience because I've done the grant work before, just trying to do good. And I think that's the way we approach things sometimes with good intentions, but without that vision, good intentions always go awry. So it's the same thing. It's no different in our families. We have to have that vision. That vision is key, and being willing to revisit it when necessary is going to keep us headed to where we need to go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop though.
Oh, you're fine. What really inspires me is the development of running this 12-week challenge to parents to sit down and have intentional conversations is for this very reason. And we have said it over and over again during this talk, just how important it is to have this dialogue. So we're talking to you now via Facebook Live, but I want to encourage those of you who are listening. Again, we have shared this is for single parents and married couples. So if you are a single parent, I would encourage you to sit down and do this work, and to invite your children so that they know what role they play. Now, they will not be a provider or anything of that nature, but they do play a critical role, as we've talked about even in our household during the pandemic. Our children do play a specific role to make the running of the household go well for us and help mom and dad stay on track for what we need to do to get our family to where we want to be. So I do want to encourage, if you're listening in and you're wondering today, well, this is all great, but what will I do? Again, this doesn't take perfect people, perfect families, perfect parents, none of that. All it takes is you being willing to sit down and revision, do all of the things that we are talking about today. So I want to thank Tony and Nicole for taking the time to speak with us and really just give them an opportunity. If there's anything else that they would like to share before we close out this conversation, please do. I know you usually have your rundown of what you want us to take with us, your nuggets, your wisdom and advice. And then we have a special treat. We have someone who will join us. I'll introduce her in a little bit with a poem to close us out.
Before we do the rundown, I would just want to speak to those who are single parents, because I know Nicole and I, we were both raised by single parents, and like most traditional Black children, the single parent was the mother, right? And what I would say to you is, look, we know it's hard, but what I would ask you to do is do an honest assessment of yourself, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then really look to see how you can supplement those with your community. Because that, once again, it takes a village to raise how we know we quote it and all that kind of good stuff, but really see how you can bring in other people to supplement your weaknesses. And it's really and it's almost like what happens in a divorce situation. It's like, well, I know the course would always decide this way, but it's like the standard is supposed to be the best interest of the child, right? So look and see what you can do in the best interest of your child, and like I said, take an honest assessment of your strengths and weaknesses. Because look, I have some good news for you that we all know, but I want to take some pressure off of you. Whether you are a single parent or if you're married, guess what? You are flawed. You are not perfect.
That's good.
And just remove that burden from yourself, and just understand, hey, I'm flawed, and now I need some help. And now, so the challenge for you is not necessarily in trying to be perfect. The challenge for you is, how do I get the resources to help me in my imperfections for the best interest of my children? That's what I would say in closing, especially for the single parents, because I know it is tough. I don't know. I don't think I know I would have been a horrible single parent if I had to be. Because when I look at everything that Nicole has done and is doing, I know I couldn't have done it by myself. But yet there are some people who are unfortunately like our parents were. Even though your dad was in and out, mine wasn't in at all. Once he bounced, he bounced, and he was like that Super Bowl. Once he bounced, he was gone for good, right? But nevertheless, we know that there are some unique challenges that you just don't have any control over. But nevertheless, those challenges are still there.
And I want to encourage you. I don't have a rundown because I wasn't quite sure how we were going to have this conversation today. And we always try to give what is needed for the audience that we are speaking with. And so today I just want to encourage everybody who's listening that we're all trying to figure this out. There is no one way to make this all work, but what we all have to do is be determined to not give up. And that is a decision that we're making every day. I know whenever Tony and I are not on the same page, like say we're upset with each other, what has been constant is that we did not give up on what we were working towards. Our being mad at each other didn't make us stop being responsible to one another and being responsible to the goals and being responsible to our children. And so that's another piece. Because it's easy to talk about these things and even try to implement them when everything is going well. But what do you do when you're not liking each other anymore? Or what do you do when your kids fall off the wagon and they're not doing so well in school, or they get with the wrong group of kids, or you find that they're doing something online that they shouldn't be, or they're dating someone that you don't agree with? With us being Christians, and we say that Christ is our foundation, we mean that. So anything that we're talking to you about, we mean it. We implement it, we follow it, and we mean it. So we read the Bible. Our children read the Bible. We have Bible studies together.
Even now today.
We stand on scripture. We pray. We pray individually. We pray collectively. We trust that God has what's best for us. We are constantly working on our faith to trust that God is going to see us through every situation that we don't necessarily see what the answer is. We have to be honest with ourselves and with each other, how we're feeling. And that's difficult as well, because a lot of times you don't want to show your children, your spouse, areas of failure or pain. But for the greater good of the family and where it is that we're trying to go, and knowing that we all need each other to get there, that trust and that honesty is really important. So I want to encourage you to every day give yourself permission to work on this and to make mistakes, but to get back up and continue to try. For another resource, we have just some videos that are on our YouTube channel, Empowered to Engage. We talk about parenting there. We talk about marriage there. We talk about leadership there, and being a person of good character. We have these books. Our website, become a student of your children, of parenting, of marriage, of family. Get the resources you need. Just like we talked earlier, we put effort, time, energy into our jobs, into projects, our businesses, but we don't put that same investment in our families, in our relationships, in our children. And we have to learn how to be good spouses and good parents. It's not something that's innate. And we have to trust the process. So those are the nuggets that I would offer before we close today. And we are so grateful for this opportunity, Antonio and Precious, to share with you and with your audience in hopes that we all become better parents for it and better families.
Thank you again for taking the time to be with us. I want to introduce Sabrina Allison. She's a nurse. She loves working with youth that have disabilities to empower them. She has 2 sons, She was a single mother, but both of her children have gone to college, and one is still in college today. And she has a poem that she would love to leave with us called Family Joy.
Yes, I am Sabrina Allison. I do have two sons. I was a single mom. The son is in the full time. He does
Listeners, please bear with us for a minute. We're
two
having
degrees,
audio issues.
but he chose something else, and is still in college, and take no opportunity for granted. The one thing about being a family, whether it's a two or a single home, children do have voices, and sometimes, and I'm guilty of it myself, we allow our children to have their voices. So, can you hear me?
We are having a little bit of audio issues where you're coming in
Can you
and
hear me?
out. Yes, now we can hear you, and you are very clear.
Can you hear me?
What we may need to do is invite Sabrina back to read her poem. We may get with her after this so that we can leave it on the Facebook Live session. Sabrina, we definitely are excited to have you join us, and we do want to hear what you had to say, but we're having some audio issues, so I will try to work that out with you. In closing, okay, would Nicole like to read it? Do you have the poem available to you to read?
Let me see where it is. Let's see. Okay. I do. I have it right here. So I'll try it. I don't read poetry, but I'll do my best. Family Joy is the title of the poem. Since time began, family has become the very essence of our foundation, passing down things like names, telling old stories, and traditions to each generation. We find pleasure in hands and feet that suddenly grow. In a blink of an eye, it's PTA meetings, late nights at the office, and off to college our children go. This does not happen without a well thought out plan, each family member doing whatever he or she can. There will be times in life that this won't be an easy task. God said in His Word, anything you lack, just ask. Remember, what we do as parents, we will see again. Be your child's parents and role model first, not their friends.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your words with us, Sabrina. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Tony and Nicole, for joining us today. And thanks to my husband, Antonio, for joining the live. This is not his thing, but he decided that he would be with me today. And he did a great job. I always think that he had presence. So again, we have quite a few authors for the lineup for our guest speakers, and Tony and Nicole, as they have already shared, they have so many books to share with us. Be on the lookout for a book giveaway, so stay active in the group. We will do that at a later date. If there was any information that helped you out today, please share the Facebook group with other parents that could benefit from the conversation. I want to particularly invite dads and fathers into this group because the information is very much so for our mothers, fathers, male and female. In closing, parents, always remember that you are your child's best advocate.
You've invested tons of time into your child, but you don't have to do it alone. Does your 4th through 12th grade child need an outlet to focus on how to reach their highest potential in school, in life, and beyond? Here at the Shield Mentor Program, our college and professional mentors are waiting to serve you through our Shield online community, a place for parents and youth with the same interests to connect in a fun and safe virtual environment. From helpful parenting information to social and emotional support for your child and everything in between, join us to connect with others who live near and far in a much-needed space to get the help your child needs for their future success through our mentorship and leadership programs. It's never been easier for you to connect your child with the resources they need. Join us today at www.shieldmentor.org to connect with like-minded parents looking to see their child succeed.